Hello and welcome to the Jim Cliver Show. It is 3 p.m. here on a Friday, August 21st in 2020. The days seem to mix together. Sometimes I don't remember the days. Thank goodness I have a calendar in the top right of my screen where I can remember what day it is. Oh, goodness. Today I wanted to talk about a topic that has been weighing on my mind. Again, probably for another 4 years, but it's this idea of loyalty. It's idea of loyalty in politics, but it's loyalty to the branch of politics. So, I'm going to end it because hold on. Nope. Don't have to end it. Just realized I have the wrong overlay there. Let me do that real quick. Fix that. There we go. Let's get that ready to go. Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. Talking about branch loyalty. And what does this mean? So, as I've looked at politics over the last couple of years, I've noticed that loyalty seems to be a big thing. I think loyalty is almost always a big thing when it comes to personal relationships in society. And what I've noticed, though, is that the loyalty seems to be very hyper-focused on party loyalty or loyalty to one specific person within the party, so personal loyalty. And that seems to break how the Constitution was written. Because from what I understand, the Constitution was written to balance powers between three branches. And so you have the Article 1, which establishes Congress, the legislative branch. You have Article 2, which establishes the executive branch, the presidency. And you have Article 3, which establishes the judicial branch, the Supreme Court, and justices. And what I've been noticing, at least over the last 4 years, but I'm sure it's been going on much longer, is that people who get elected to Congress, whether they're Republican or Democrat, often have more loyalty to their political party, being a Republican or Democrat, than they do to being a senator or a representative in the U.S. House of Representatives. And when they have more loyalty to their party, it can cross-cut through the different branches. So, for example, if someone is a Democrat and they feel more loyalty to the Democratic Party, it doesn't matter so much whether they're in Congress, whether they're in the office of the president, or whether they're in the judicial branch, because their identity lies in their party identity. And I wonder if it's always been this way, or I wonder if this has changed in the last couple of years. Because the problem with that is, if my underlying identity and most important identity is the party, then when I'm in Congress, I'm not going to check and balance the person who's in the president's office if that person is of the same party. But that fundamentally breaks the checks and balances of the system. So if I am trying to be true to what this country was founded on, then I almost at least have to have more strength and more loyalty to my branch of office. And I think this is what's breaking a lot of the things that have happened in the last 4 years, is that Trump will do something and then Congress won't stop him. And part of it, I think, is because they're of the same party, that the Republicans in Congress are saying, well, this is our Republican leader and our party leader. So it, in a way, he makes the choices. But that's not how government's set up in the U.S. Government's supposed to be set up, and then the laws and everything has been structured so that it balances. The only check we have, really, on like the main check we have against the presidency, is Congress. It's impeachment. It's other types of oversight that Congress does, and the judicial branch has some as well. But if if the Republicans in Congress and the Republicans in the Oval Office and the Republicans in the Supreme Court, or the Democrats, same thing, if they have more affinity and more loyalty and unity with their party than they do with their branch, then we just spin in circles. And it frustrates me. It frustrates me so much because it's not the only loyalty that they have. So if I elect somebody here from Michigan to be a senator, say I elect a Democrat to be a senator from Michigan, not only do they have the identity of being a senator, a U.S. senator, but they also have the identity of being from Michigan. They also have the identity of being from Democratic Party. And you could argue more. If it's a female, she has a female identity. If she's a Christian, she has a Christian identity, and et cetera, et cetera. And the problem comes when one of those identities takes precedence over all of them, especially when that identity is not the one that is assigned from the law. So just imagine that. So instead of using like the Democratic or the Republican Party as being the cross-cutting identity, what if it were something different? What if it were place of origin? So maybe it was people from Michigan. So what if somebody who gets elected as a congressman in Michigan does nothing to stop a president who is from Michigan because, hey, they're both from Michigan and the loyalty runs deep. And so I'm not going to vote against anything that the president does because the president is the head of my Michigan party, and therefore I am not going to check him at all. And maybe that it's not such a big deal because there's only one senator from Michigan or two senators from Michigan in the Senate, so it doesn't matter too much. But what if that's something like, let's take it more on the gender side. What if it's someone who identifies as man, as a male, who is from, who is in Congress and says, well, there's a guy who's in president, so I'm going to just do whatever he says because he's the leader of men. And then the women are like, what are you doing? Like, what are you talking about? You're not going to check him just because he's a man? Like, that doesn't make any sense. Or if it were vice versa, if there are women who say, well, she's a woman, so I'm just going to let her do what she wants. And I don't care if my responsibility is to check her because we women need to stay united and need to stay loyal to each other. It seems absurd to me that maybe not absurd, but it frustrates me because it defeats the checks and balances that we've set up. And I think the checks and balances are beautiful, but it seemed to found this loophole, and it just keeps us in this kind of spinning cycle. So, for example, today I woke up and looked at Twitter and found out that somebody mentioned that the executive branch may be removing the authority from the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, to regulate the tests for COVID-19. One, it baffled me because yesterday I had a conversation with a neighbor who works on clinical trials and basically told me how much the FDA has saved lives. It's a pain in the butt to work through because it's a very long process, a very expensive process, but how it has really saved the livelihoods or like the lives of many people. So it really baffled me that they would do this. But then the thing that hit me harder was, okay, let them try to do what they want to do, but who is there to look over them? Who is there to give the oversight? And if the party is so in bed with each other that they avoid the differences between the branches, then there's not much we can do. I mean, through the democratic channels, which frustrates me. And I wonder how it got to this point. Is it because the parties are the main fundraisers for individuals? If I were to run for Congress in U.S. Congress coming from Michigan, Michigan doesn't give me a lot of money. Congress itself doesn't give me money. Congress and Michigan don't help me get elected. They don't like go on the campaign trail for me. They don't help me organize my campaign. They don't do things like that. But the Democratic Party would, or the Republican Party, or the Libertarian Party. And I wonder how much is like, well, we helped you get elected, so therefore you owe your loyalty to us. That attitude. And with the increase in lobbying that has happened since the 70s, as my buddy James D'Angelo talks about, where we had the Sunshine Reform Act, where it brought in more quote unquote transparency to Congress, it meant that more lobbyists could leave the lobby and sit in on sessions and watch and make sure that people are doing it. So is it coming from the lobbyists? Is it coming from the parties themselves? So where do loyalties of these elected representatives lie? Do they lie or rather, where do the strong loyalties lie? Because I'm sure that there are loyalties there, but when loyalties conflict, it's hard. Who are you going to prioritize? And I think for many elected officials, unfortunately, they get bullied into prioritizing the party desires, the party goals, and the party line, instead of what they believe is best to represent all of the people that they have to represent. I feel somewhat stuck. I don't know if this is I don't know what the solution is. I mean, in my mind, it says the solution is having more loyalty and more pride in being a part of a specific branch. If you get elected to be a U.S. senator, you are a U.S. senator, and taking pride in that, more than taking pride in that you were a Democrat or Republican. But I don't know how we do that. I don't know how we build that strength of identity. Like even when people are running for the presidency, the people themselves, I don't know if they recognize or appreciate the differences between being a legislator and being someone in the executive branch. When Kirsten Gillibrand came to Michigan, I think it was last year, and my dad and I went out to see her, I wanted to ask the question, very simple question. You have been a senator in the legislative branch, and now you will be moving, if you win, to the executive branch. What differences and similarities do you anticipate from switching branches of government? I don't think people think about this. I don't think the people running, I don't think the voters think about the differences in the job. Being a senator or a representative is very different than being a president or vice president or secretary. Very different. It's very different than being a Supreme Court justice. Very different. If you're a senator or a representative, if you're a senator, you and one other person are representing your state. And typically you have an office of a few people, maybe, I don't know, probably larger than if you were a representative. But you sit there and you try to help with writing legislation. You do oversight, so you run committees. And there's a lot of deliberation. There's a lot of working on a team with many people, trying to figure out what you should all do together, trying to, what do you call it? Not persuade many other people at the same level as you and understand why they may vote in the way that they're going to vote. Whereas if you're in the executive branch, it's much more top-down hierarchy. It's much more command and control, where you don't have to deliberate with people. What you actually have to do if you're the president is you have to manage a huge organization with millions of people, including the military. It's a very different job. It's a very different job. You don't get to write the rules. Now, arguably in the last couple of years, the last couple presidencies, presidents have written more executive orders. So in a way, kind of writing rules. And yes, they have the freedom to write some rules on how the different departments are run, but they don't get to choose how much money is spent where. They don't do appropriations. They don't do many aspects that legislation does. And they don't get to interpret the law that much. Just they have a little bit of freedom in discretion, but the Supreme Court is the one that ultimately rules on that in the rest of the court system. And so they're just different jobs. They're really different jobs, but we kind of all lump them together. Oh, if they're a Democrat running for Senate or running for president, it's kind of the same thing. No, they're very different jobs. I don't know. To me, they seem incredibly different. And maybe if we started to highlight that a little more and the different skills, the different abilities, the different responsibilities and roles that people have when they take these different offices, and seeing them as more different than we currently see them. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there are a lot of people out there that are very aware of the differences between being a senator and being a president, or being a Supreme Court justice or a representative. But I doubt it. I really doubt it. I don't think many of us get a lot of civics education or learn about how government works on our own. I mean, maybe through TV, or maybe through getting frustrated with one of the presidents and therefore diving deep into it. But it's almost like the parties found a loophole in the way that the Constitution was written, and we haven't resolved it. We got to close the loophole. That's my belief. Because if we can close this loophole, then we can restore the checks and balances to government. And if we have checks and balances, then it doesn't really matter too much who the president is, because then the president can do and try to do whatever they want to do, but will be checked by the other branches. But when we have these strong political alliances that cut across the branches, then the system only appears to work, but it doesn't. And so then we get congressional hearings that are decided by party line. So when I watch a hearing now, I can almost predict, without looking and without even knowing who the person is, whether they are a Democrat or whether they're a Republican, just by the way that they're questioning the witness. And when I look at a lot of the votes, now maybe it's because I'm not looking at all the votes, but I imagine more and more votes are becoming votes by party line, where all the Republicans vote this way, all the Democrats vote this way. What's the point of having representatives if they all vote according to the party alliance? Why even have representatives? Why don't we just vote for a party, and then we don't even need people there to make decisions, right? If I know at the end of this year's 2020 that, Democrats win the House and the Senate, then why do I even need Democrats in there if they're always going to vote along the party lines? It's just, we might as well just have one Democratic stamp with a certain number on it and a Republican stamp with another number on it, and save ourselves a lot of time and money in the voting process. But I think we can be better than that. I think we can do better than that. I think people go into Congress because they really do care. I think they go into office in general because they really care. They actually want to help. But unfortunately, maybe over time, they get sucked more and more into these party fiefdoms, where it's us versus them. They're not on our team, and we need to be united against them. But then they forget about their people back home. If I were to get elected as Senator of Michigan, I'm not just representing my party. I'm representing people of all parties, not just Republican or Democrat or Libertarian, but people of all places within Michigan, of all backgrounds, of all beliefs, of all intentions. That's my responsibility, is to everyone in the state. Elected as president, the responsibility is to everyone in the country, regardless of party. But I think politics is getting so divided by party lines. And while it makes some things easier in terms of voting, oh, okay, if I'm a Democrat or a Republican, then it's easier for me to just vote. Okay, I'm just going to vote for all the Democrats. It makes it a lot easier. I don't have to think too much. But that breaks how the checks and balances work. I mean, I feel like I'm sounding like a broken record, and I hope this isn't becoming too repetitive for you, but it's... I guess I just wish that... Yeah, I wish that there were more pride in taking a specific office in a specific branch. And that the pride and the loyalty is to that branch and to the Constitution, which separates those branches into checks and balances, over the tribes, the political tribes that we've formed into. Unless we want to stay in these political tribes and we like it in these political tribes, which is, I would say, is okay, but requires a different constitution. Our constitution is not set up for this, at least from what I can tell. It's set up to have different loyalties across the branches. And so when the loyalties are much stronger along the party lines, how do we build a government that has checks and balances across the parties? Maybe we need to look into that. I think it sounds like a lot of work, and I don't really know what the answer would be to do that. But maybe, again, if we believe so strongly in these parties, maybe we should try to figure out a way to balance their powers across governance. But the problem with that is that somebody's going to find a loophole in that too. I was talking with my friend yesterday, and he said something about, we have this current medical insurance industry. And he said, we could switch to something like Medicare for all. But when we switch to Medicare for all, there's going to be problems as well. It's just different problems. So do we want to have our current system with the problems it has and try to resolve those problems, or switch to a new system, which, yes, will have some benefits, but we'll also have problems, and we'll have new problems as well. New benefits, but new problems. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. So I pull back and I ask the same question for our system of governance. Should we change the Constitution so that it does help us balance more the party loyalties that we're seeing? I personally don't think so. I think we'll do that, and then somebody will find another loophole and try to exploit that. I think it's about trying to reestablish loyalties to the branches, understanding the difference in the branches that are set out in the Constitution and the checks and balances, and closing the loopholes so that the parties can't do this. And maybe the solution isn't as complicated as we think. I want to bring my friend James D'Angelo on the show one day and talk to him about this idea of more confidentiality in congressional hearings, and letting the House and the Senate meet a little more privately, so that they can discuss things without having so much, what do you call it, peer pressure to conform to the party line or to the lobbyists' line. And I think, in a way, there's way too much conforming happening in Congress, and way too much peer pressure to conform. And I think one of the ways to help alleviate the peer pressure, is to give people some more privacy in their deliberation and decision making. Now, it may be a controversial topic for some people to hear, because if we don't trust them, why would we give them more space. Why would give them more privacy if we don't trust them? But the problem is, with too much transparency, we also lose trust. Because too much transparency isn't trust, it's just surveillance. And when we have so much surveillance, we can push people in the directions that we want them to. And unfortunately, the ones with a lot of power can push people stronger than we can. And the parties seem to have a very strong grip on individuals. It's easy to talk about how these congressional representatives should stick to their congressional identities more than their political ones or their party identities. But I'm not in the position. I don't know what it's like. I don't know what pressures they face. I don't know what's the penalty for not aligning with those identities. I don't know. I think we just get ourselves into a situation of a lot of groupthink, and we pull out the ability, we remove the ability for people to sit there and reflect and deliberate and make a decision based on what they think is best for the people they're representing and for the country and for the world. Because in a way, whether we want to admit it or not, or whether we notice it or not, the American government gets a lot of attention from people around the world. And a lot of people are looking to us to inspire them, to be an example for how it can be done. So many countries see so many party loyalties, and the countries are run by the parties. Some of them just have one party. Many countries just have one party. They have other parties in name, but they don't get much recognition because they break the system of checks and balances in the government. If the system even has the checks and balances in the constitutions or other founding documents. But I think people around the world look to us for hope on how to run a government that isn't run by the special interests, isn't run by the special parties, and doesn't have concentrated power. It's almost like having monopolistic power in the parties, or duopoly in the parties, instead of having the power reside in the branches where the rules and the game was set up to exist. Politics is a game. We created rules to balance the game, and now the parties seem to be breaking it. It's almost like I'm playing let's say I'm playing a basketball game. Let's say I'm playing hockey. I'm playing hockey against another team, and I'm on the Detroit Red Wings, and the other guy's on the Chicago Blackhawks. And because both of us came from the same small town up in Canada, we don't care who wins the game. We're going to pass each other the puck. We really care about each other, so we don't check each other, and we don't do these things because we care more about the other person than we do about the teams. We don't care if our team loses or wins. We care about us losing and winning. So I'll feed him the puck so he gets a couple goals. He'll feed me the puck so I get a couple goals. And our fantasy stats will go wild, and people will be very excited for us. Yeah, they're such great players. I can't imagine how great they are. But the teams will lose, and whatever, we don't care, because really we don't have loyalty to the teams. We get traded and shifted all the time. Why do I care about the team? Who I care about are my friends from back home who I used to play with. These are the people that matter, and that's what matters. That breaks the rules of hockey. Like, it breaks the game. It just doesn't make the game any fun anymore, and really doesn't make the game make sense anymore. So I'm hoping that we can relook at politics and branch loyalty, and really try to step up the loyalty that we have to the different congressional, to legislative, executive, and judicial branches, so that we can restore our country to having more solid checks and balances, and the ability to fight off these other loyalties that sneak in and try to take precedence. I don't know if that was useful for you. That was 30 minutes. I can't believe I talked for 30 minutes. I hope you didn't get lost in some of my pauses, and that this sparks something in your mind. For me, it's something I want to talk about for a very long time, and I think it's important as we think about the election coming up. And I hope that it's something that starts a conversation within you. This is not the answer. This is just hopefully conversation starters for you and for your family to talk about, and just for something for you to reflect on as we go into the election in, I think, less than 75 days. So, all right.